The National Desk, America's News, now.
Underwater, multiple states dealing with flash flood watches as severe storms take hold across the country. Ahead, why the end of the cold snap will endanger millions more with warm temperatures.
Incredibly concerning, Leon, when we deplore today's attack on the UN's Khan Yunis Training Center.
Strongest words yet from Washington over apparent Israeli tank fire that hit a UN facility sheltering displaced Gazans. How it's pulling the U.S. further into a war it never wanted.
Trump, you have one bout of chaos after another. This court case, that controversy, this tweet, that senior moment.
Staying in the race, Nikki Haley keeps pressure on Donald Trump, but is there a path to victory in the head-to-head contest? This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David, and right now, a significant storm system that is making its way across the eastern half of the country, the worst of it stretching from Texas all the way up to Ohio. Around 35 million people are under flood watches today as heavy rain and melting snow threaten states from the south to the northeast. Freezing rain, snow, and ice also a concern and in the forecast for parts of the Midwest, Great Lakes, and the Northeast by tonight. Also ahead, warmer than usual temperatures for around 270 million people through Friday. We're expecting significant snow melt in the Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast with lows that are 40 to 50 degrees above average. Those daily lows could break several records tonight and tomorrow night. And breaking right now in downtown St. Louis, SWAT teams and police on the scene of a hostage situation on the second floor of the Drury Hotel there. It began this morning when an armed man held a woman and two children captive inside a room. 9:30 local time, the children were released, but the standoff, it has continued throughout the day. As far as we know, no injuries have been reported and nearby rooms have been evacuated. Both Donald Trump and Nikki Haley now turn their sights to South Carolina, which holds its GOP primary next month. Following Trump's second victory in a row, he remains the frontrunner, but his lead is not insurmountable, at least not yet. Now, in order to win that Republican nomination for the third time, Trump is going to need 1,215 delegates. So far, his lead is just 15, 32 to 17 over Haley. But the road to victory for Nikki Haley could be near impossible. Atra al-Nashar explains.
Former President Donald Trump pulling off a decisive victory in the New Hampshire primary, 11 points ahead of former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley.
This is a fantastic state.
Just 8 days after his victory in Iowa that was so decisive, all but one of his opponents dropped out of the race. Trump appearing irritated Haley didn't do the same Tuesday night.
I said, what's she doing? We won.
Even the Biden-Harris campaign weighed in a statement saying it is now clear that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. But Haley says the race is far from over.
New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation.
Next month, voters in Nevada and South Carolina will have their say. But because of GOP party rules, Haley is not eligible to earn delegates in Nevada. In her home state, former President Trump is way ahead of her in the polls, and the winner there will take home all 50 delegates for that state. Soon after, March 5th, that brings us to Super Tuesday. 874 delegates that night will be up for grabs across more than a dozen states, and a lot of them are winner take all. Like California. That is a huge prize. 169 delegates up for grabs there. Texas, also a really big one, 161 delegates. And the more former President Trump is winning in these states, especially winner-take-all states, the closer he's getting to the 1,215 delegates needed to secure the GOP presidential nomination. But still, Haley is insisting that she's the only Republican who can defeat President Biden in a general election. Now, out with this ad in South Carolina.
A rematch no one wants. There's a better choice for a better America. Her story started right here.
It's an uphill battle for Haley that's getting steeper as members of her party line up behind Trump. In a break from protocol, RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel says this.
I'm looking at the math and the path going forward, and I don't see it for Nikki Haley.
Despite all of this, as she's been doing since day one, Haley insists she's being underestimated.
And Atra, in the last 24 hours, there's been some notable endorsements coming in from Capitol Hill. Fill us in on that.
Right, so arguably the biggest is Texas Senator John Cornyn, because he's a member of Republican leadership. He endorsed Trump after last night's results came in. So did Nebraska Senator Deb Fischer. Now, notably, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has not given Trump his support yet, and few expect him to ever. According to the New York Times today, Senator Susan Collins of Maine said that she is glad Haley is still in the race and doesn't see herself ever endorsing Trump.
It'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. Atra El-Nashar reporting for us from Capitol Hill. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And tonight, new details emerging about another attack on 2 U.S. commercial shipping vessels by Iran-backed Houthis. And what is now just the latest in near-daily attacks, part of the Yemeni militia's stated revenge campaign against Israel's war in Gaza. And U.S. Central Command reporting tonight the latest, that the Houthis fired on 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles toward the U.S. The U.S. flagged ships carrying cargo for the Defense and State Departments in the Gulf of Aden. Now, that is just south of Yemen, right next to the Red Sea. 1 missile hit the sea. The other 2 were successfully shot down by the U.S. It comes just hours after the U.S. conducted strikes against Iran-backed militias in Iraq and against the Houthis in Yemen, and just 2 days since the U.S. and U.K. carried out their second round of joint strikes against targets in Yemen, in a Middle East conflict escalating by the day. On the ground in Gaza, the UN says there are mass civilian casualties after one of its shelters housing 30,000 displaced Gazans was struck by apparent Israeli tank fire during intense fighting in the southern city of Khan Yunis. Several deaths and dozens of injuries are now being reported. The strike drawing rare rebuke from Washington.
Civilians must be protected, and the protected nature of UN facilities must be respected. And humanitarian workers must be protected so that they can continue providing civilians with the life-saving humanitarian assistance that they need.
Now, following that rebuke, Israel denied its forces were responsible and suggested Hamas may have launched the shelling. It says it has opened a more thorough investigation. The intense combat came as the White House said it believes Israel is showing signs it's moving to more targeted operations.
Low-intensity operations doesn't mean no intensity operations. And even in a low-intensity environment, again, I won't speak for them, but from our own experience, even in low-intensity operations, you're still going to be in combat. There is still going to be fighting, and there's still going to be casualties.
This as we see an uptick in pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has opposed calls as of recent for a 2-state solution. CNN reporting today that some Arab states have demanded a guaranteed pathway for Palestinian statehood in return for normalization in relations with Israel and the funding for the reconstruction of Gaza. Arab states reportedly submitted a joint proposal earlier this week to Israel that laid out a plan by Arab nation states to train Palestinian security forces, assist with reviving and reforming the Palestinian Authority, the leadership in the West Bank, and eventually helping to organize elections. So far, it has been rejected by Israel's government. Hamas has also reportedly rejected the notion of a 2-state solution at this time. And right now, a massive manhunt underway in Arkansas's Jefferson County. Law enforcement there looking for 2 escaped inmates from the Dub Brassel Detention Center in Pine Bluff. Noah Roush, 22 years old, right there on your screen on the left, and Jatanya Bryant, 23, were gone for up to 48 hours before they were discovered missing. Roush was in custody in connection to a robbery and is a homicide suspect. The sheriff's office say the 2 are considered armed and dangerous and should not be approached. And new details out of Ohio, where a ban on gender-changing treatments for minors as well as transgender women's participation in girls' sports is now law. Today, the state Senate followed the House's lead and voted to override Governor Mike DeWine's veto of this bill late last month. Officials say it will take about 90 days for the law to be in full effect. Kenneth Smith, the Alabama inmate said to be the first person executed by nitrogen hypoxia, was denied a stay of the execution by the Supreme Court today. The justices did not give a reason for their order, and there were no noted dissents. Smith could be executed as soon as tomorrow. Many critics are speaking out against the method to be used, calling it experimental and cruel. New tonight, the FDA revealing those tainted applesauce pouches in question for their contents never underwent testing for heavy metals, as is protocol. The pouches have led to at least 385 lead poisoning cases across 35 states. CBS News reports the FDA is not ready to say what fully happened, but it's clear there were quality control failures. Disney is asking for a second delay in the case over who controls Disney World's governing district, which provides services like firefighting. Governor DeSantis and the Florida legislature took over the board last year after Disney denounced the state's restrictions on sexual orientation and gender identity lessons. Disney officials say they haven't received the necessary documents. Coming up, the 2024 New Hampshire primary in the books. We're going to look at the issues voters say are most important to them in this election season. Then the serious scams that officials are warning about as we head into tax season and the best ways you can avoid them. Then later, it's been almost a year since the catastrophic East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. What officials are saying about the current state of rail safety in America. A record number of voters cast a ballot in New Hampshire's Republican primary yesterday. We know the candidate these voters preferred, Donald Trump, secured the victory. Now we're learning more about the issues these voters care most about. Crime and drugs emerging as a top concern. Here's national correspondent Kayla Gaskins.
A CVS permanently closing in Washington, D.C.
It's bad that it's shutting down, man. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of our medicine that I'm getting for me and my son, that we can't even get out of there.
In-N-Out Burger getting all the way out of Oakland, California. Crime cited as the reason for both. Drug issues rising nationwide as well. In 2023, the DEA seized enough fentanyl pills to kill every American.
And the amount of drugs that continue to destroy American lives has to stop.
These concerns creeping into the 2024 election cycle. A Harvard-Harris poll conducted this January shows crime and drugs ranked number 4 of 30 among the most important issues Americans face.
I'm not surprised it's that high. I mean, if anything, it could be higher. And here's the reason why. Fentanyl is the leading cause of death in the state of Missouri. I mean, we are in a massive drug crisis.
The same poll shows only 40% of respondents approve of Biden's handling on crime and violence. A Gallup poll from November reported 63% of those polled say U.S. crime is extremely or very serious, the highest ever recorded by Gallup.
Stop these soft on crime policies. The Biden administration is soft on crime. We've had years of soft on crime policies from Congress. We've had years of soft on crime prosecutors. We need to get tough on crime and put criminals behind bars.
Back in 2020, criminal justice reform was a top issue for Democrats. This election cycle, it's very different. Candidates on the left, including President Joe Biden, are either quiet on the topic or taking a tougher on crime stance. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk. America's News Now.
All right, Kayla, thank you. President Biden has a big new endorsement. The United Auto Workers Union throwing its weight behind the Democrat today. That'll be a big boost in the battleground states like Michigan. UAW's head says it is a call to arms for union faithful.
Elections aren't about just picking your best friend for the job or the candidate who makes you feel good. Elections are about power.
The 400,000-member union held off endorsing Biden until now, citing concerns his policies were too heavily weighted toward electric vehicles. Biden joined a picket line, you may remember, just last September during the UAW strike against the top three automakers in Michigan, becoming the first sitting president in history to show that kind of support. And the Better Business Bureau is warning Americans about scams to look out for as we get deeper into tax season. The big ones are tax identity theft, email phishing, IRS impersonation, and ghost tax preparers. Ways to avoid these are researching tax agencies and preparers, doing taxes early, and making sure you're on the real IRS website when filing online. Ford is recalling nearly 2 million Explorer SUVs in the U.S. because of pieces of trim that can break off and put other drivers at risk. It applies to model years 2011 to 2019. The clips securing the trim that covers the roof supports can come loose, causing the piece to fly right off. Ford is telling owners to contact their dealers for an inspection. And restaurant rebound. New data from Yelp listings show nearly 53,800 new restaurants opened in the year 2023. That's a 10% increase from where we were in 2022. It's also a 2% increase from what we saw back in 2019, indicating openings are outpacing pre-pandemic levels. Many restaurants were hit very hard due to forced quarantine restrictions during the COVID lockdowns of 2020. So that's very good news for the restaurant industry. Washington, D.C. led the nation in most new shops per capita with 42 for every 100,000 people. The states with the most new openings were Hawaii, Oregon, Nevada, and California, all with 22 or more. Johnson & Johnson says it will pay a $700 million settlement over its baby powder. That's in response to an investigation with more than 40 states into how J&J's talc-based baby powder is marketing. The company doesn't sell it anymore, but still has liability. This doesn't end J&J's legal battles. More than 52,000 people have sued over claims that the powder caused them cancer. The American Lung Association is calling on the White House to finalize rules to end sales of menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars. Their new annual report shows tobacco remains the country's leading cause of preventable death and disease. University of Michigan researchers say banning menthol cigarettes would save around 650,000 lives over 40 years. The White House is reviewing the rules and plans to issue a final menthol rule in March. It's not just body aches and fevers that may accompany the respiratory illnesses making us sick right now. As medical reporter Liz Bonis explains, it could also lead to some potentially life-threatening complications.
Hey there, hello to you. The vaccines against COVID-19, the flu, and other viruses may not just keep you from sinus troubles. If you get one of these nasty respiratory infections or viruses, heart specialists now say they could also reduce the risk for heart problems. Some pretty serious heart troubles that even years ago seemed to be connected to the respiratory illness season.
Even as early as 1930, people noticed that during flu season there were more heart attacks happening.
Preventive cardiologist Dr. Konstantin German of Ohio's TriHealth Heart Institute says more recent heart research shows it's likely due to two things. The first is the inflammatory process in the body when you're sick. It can cause plaque in the heart to rupture.
Which is when you have disease in the coronary arteries themselves, and when there's enough inflammation that can actually lead to, displacement of those plaques, leading to heart attacks.
The second reason there are more heart attacks this cold and flu season is that we've added COVID-19. This virus makes the lungs prone to blood clots.
We are now seeing those also happening in the coronary arteries. So people as young as their early 30s I've seen having pretty significant heart attacks just, with COVID-19 being their only risk factor.
If you have COVID-19, the flu, or another virus going around right now, Dr. German says pay attention to your symptoms.
There's no better way to get your heart rate up than a fever. And with these viruses, the fever happens and people start to notice chest pains and kind of worsening chest discomfort.
Bottom line is, if you do have a respiratory illness and chest heaviness kind of quickly sets in, it's suggested you seek medical attention. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
All right, Liz, thank you. And coming up, travel is getting a lot more expensive. What you need to know about protecting your investment before booking your next trip. We have reporters all across the country covering the issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in D.C., where an expert explains how to prepare for travel-related risks as traveling costs climb.
Your car insurance might already cover you if you rent a car and you get into an accident. So you don't necessarily need additional coverage there. Or you might carry a travel rewards credit card that has built-in travel protections that can really come in handy if your trip is canceled or significantly delayed, or even if your baggage gets lost, stolen, or damaged.
Travel insurance covers a number of travel-related risks. Most insurance providers offer several different policies with higher or lower levels of coverage and prices to match.
The most expensive and most comprehensive is called cancel for any reason coverage. Just like it says, you can back out of your trip for any reason, and you'll get about 75% back of what you spent on your trip.
Do you feel like the railway system is safer a year after East Palestine?
Well, I can tell you that we have taken a number of steps to make it safer, but Congress could and should do more.
That's U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg speaking to me Tuesday about the state of the nation's railway system, less than 2 weeks from the one-year anniversary of the Norfolk Southern train derailment in East Palestine. That event caused a massive chemical spill and burn-off, creating environmental concerns that could last for years to come. In our interview, Buttigieg touted the tighter inspections his administration has put in place since the derailment. They're also trying to implement rules which would mandate at least 2 workers on longer freight trains. But he says the railroad industry is pushing back on that for cost reasons.
Brian Eberhard says he and his brother were hired to trim branches that hung over a driveway in Middletown. Suddenly, 66-year-old Donna Benish came running outside, demanding they stop. Eberhard says the woman ran back into her house and came out ready to protect her Norway maple.
She literally got a ladder and leaned it up against a tree and climbed it to the top of the ladder with a thermos and a backpack.
But Eberhard and his brother continued cutting, so Benish came down her ladder.
She ran into her house and came out with a rifle and pointed it at him.
At this point, the brothers realized they needed to call 911. Police say the gun the suspect pointed at the worker was fake, but a real rifle was confiscated from inside her home. They, along with Newport police, arrested Benish at a nearby business a few hours later.
Coming up, it's not Chicago, it's not New York, the city where developers want to build the new tallest skyscraper in the country. Well, Groundhog Day is right around the corner, and the people for the ethical treatment of animals say Punxsutawney Phil in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, deserves better. In a recent letter, PETA offered to replace the groundhog with a giant gold coin and release Phil to a sanctuary. The annual Groundhog Day celebration is February 2nd. And developers want to build the tallest skyscraper in the country in Oklahoma City. Madison Capital and Architecture company AO originally planned to build the second tallest building there, but they're asking the city if what's being called Legends Tower can now be 1,907 feet, reflecting the year Oklahoma became a state. That would make it the tallest building in the world. What a claim to fame that would be. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. Thank you so much for joining us.